This episode is supported by ArcIT Section Cut, the interactive virtual conference from our friends at Monograph, and Twinmotion. You'll hear more about them later in the show. How's the content business?
It's been good. COVID was, the shock, to everybody. So it didn't make the business skyrocket. It kind of just slowed us down a little bit because we were growing, a pretty good clip. So it still grew, but just not as fast as we were. So it was just kind of like a cool your jets and let's see where this thing takes us. Yeah, I was telling Gabe when I was talking to him earlier that we see lots of data, obviously, with the traffic with our software. And the good news is since January, it's been skyrocketing, like faster than we've ever been moving.
Wow.
And so that's a good sign. I think hopefully it's a little bit early indicator from the sales and sales activity standpoint. And then, if you just step back from, I think there's going to be a lot of money pumped into construction, infrastructure and construction over the next few years. So with that coming, I can't imagine that the business won't be good in general.
I would love to have a conversation today around the topic of the importance of content. Maybe kind of frame it from those who get it and those who don't kind of a point of view. And I think you could probably speak the most to both sides of that equation. I think that there's a lot of people out there who don't understand. Like I read this Twitter thread this morning, a very short thread, but it was like, why did you model a door? Like we already had doors in this project. And the guy's like, those aren't doors, those are detail lines. Like that's not a door. And the guy's like, I don't have time to pay you to model doors. And so like this is still happening. And that's like the most basic example of this issue. And I totally get it from both sides of that equation. Like there's the part of me that says you got to look way down the road. You got to have this kind of long game attitude about the purpose of BIM, the highest and best use of BIM, its potential. But then there's like this day-to-day incentivization of shortcuts. And that's what drawings have always been.
The grind, yeah.
And another layer of complexity on top of that is that drawings are an abstracted representation of design intent. Like they're not reality. Right. There's no metadata ever in drawings previously, right? So a lot of people still have a hard time seeing that future potential value that lives inside a model of detail and metadata and information. Welcome to the Troxel Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel. Before I introduce my guest for this episode, I want to do a bit of housekeeping and ask you a small favor. I hope that you've been enjoying the episodes, especially recently. I really feel like I've been hitting a stride, and I could use your help to build a little bit of momentum. First, please share the episodes with your friends and your network on social and in your offices, public networks, private networks. I don't care. Personal referrals are the best recommendations. Second, please rate the show. I personally love seeing those 5-star ratings, I'm not going to lie, but that is not all they're good for. This audience is smart enough to know that it helps the show get more attention from the great algorithm in the sky, and in turn helps the show get recommended to more people. So wherever you listen to podcasts, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever, please pause right now before you forget and give it a 5-star rating. The episode will still be here when you get back. So that's it for housekeeping. Let's get on with the introduction. In this episode, I welcome Randall Stevens. Randall is the Chief Executive Officer at AVAIL. You may also know of him from his first company, ArcVision, that he founded in 1991, which was and still is a software company specializing in 3D graphics, specifically RPCs, rich photorealistic content. That eventually led him to founding AVAIL, which is an architectural asset content management system. He's also the chair of the Building Content Summit, which is an event dedicated to improving BIM content by bringing together thought leaders from around the world of design, manufacturing, and software/services. And in this episode, we talk about some of the more difficult problems in AEC, the struggle of different team members having different incentives, seeing both sides of the coin regarding drawings as representation versus the true potential of BIM, assets and liabilities, vulnerability, and so much more. I truly enjoyed this conversation with Randall, and I hope that you do too. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Randall Stevens. Randall, welcome to the podcast. Great to see you and hear you.
Thanks, Evan.
It's been a while. Yeah.
Yes. Enjoy it. And always, one thing I miss, you were asking before we started recording this, what the last year and a half has looked like. And one of the things I miss the most, I'm probably a pretty social person. So I miss the conferences and getting to see, what I would consider friends, industry friends that I would always run into at the various shows and places that we would go. So that's probably what I've missed the most.
I was just saying that to myself the other day. It was like, I just miss going into an office for the people part of it. And I kind of ambivert, like I switch modes between introvert and extrovert. The older I get, I feel like the more I value my alone time.
Yeah.
But I really miss that about being in the office. And you're right, the conferences, I think that's the last time you and I saw each other was in person, was either at Built or at AU or something.
Probably,
but,
yeah. Yeah, and then I've been doing that stuff for so long. It's like, yes, every time I go, it's probably just so I can see all of my friends, right? Old friends, and talk shop like we're getting ready to do.
So let's start. Like you said, you've been going to conferences for a long time. Why? What? Tell us tell the audience how you got to where you are now with AVAIL.
I guess how far back do we want to go?
Take as long as you want. Yeah.
So the history is, for those that don't know me, I'm the founder, besides AVAIL, of a company called ArcVision, which has been around. I started that company back in 1991, as soon as I graduated from architecture school. So I've kind of been in that company started as a services company doing services work, but by the late 90s, we were in the software business, and for what most people know us for. So, really since the late 90s, as far as the business, I was always, at conferences and at shows as a vendor, and, use that as a way to be out and get to meet people. The nice thing from a business standpoint about being in the software business, and we got into this relatively early in the 90s, and you can sell software to everybody in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So use the internet and use all of that. But at the same time, I'm a social person too. It's like I need to be around, but I also think it plays a big part in, for myself, at least I've justified the expense and going and doing these things, that you have to be around ultimately our customers. We talk to our customers incessantly, try to learn. I like to say or think that I know enough to be dangerous. It's kind of like, right. I think I know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to go out and test this against the real world, right?
That's this whole podcast, man.
Yeah. But it's true. And, there's the old saying that the older you get, the more you realize you don't know. And I think that's wisdom for sure, right? And the kinds of things that we do, it's like, on one hand, I could probably claim that I've become one of the world's experts on content management, at least in the architecture, engineering, construction market. But at the same time, it's like I can also admit that I don't really know much because I don't practice. I don't really know what's going on, inside the daily workings inside of some of these firms. So that's where we try to bridge. I say we, it's like not only myself, but the rest of the company. We try to, like, I'll take my engineers to these conferences too, because I want them to be in front of the customers, and I want them to hear it, and I want them to see, hear, smell the problems in the same ways that I'm experiencing that. So we've always made that. I've always thought that was an important aspect of what we do, is in order to do things that are relevant, spend as much time around our customers and potential customers as we can. So we usually do that through conferences. And really, for us, if you interact with us at these kinds of conferences and shows, we're not a very salesy company. We're very conversational about what we're doing. We're always just looking at, can we sell a problem? So, I think we hear from our customers. They like that about us. They like the entire team that we've put together, that we're easy people to work with, good Southern hospitality.
That's kind of the business development model of, like you just said, hospitality. It's very much conversational and curious, like curiosity. I'm sure, like, coming from that architectural background, you've got to be curious about the people that you're providing the service to, whether it's a building design or software, right? Like,
it is. And
that's the best part of it, I think.
I think that's the thread. There's a lot of people that will say some of the best people in the software industry and make the best software are actually people who are architects or, were trained. I never practiced. I have a degree in architecture, but I think it's because the thread that's there, it's about process. And when you learn, I wrote a piece I graduated from the University of Kentucky, and I'm sitting here at our offices, which are located in Lexington, Kentucky. I wrote a piece for the alumni magazine just in the last few months that came out, and I'm surprised they actually let me. And you have to be the right age to get the title, but I said it's the process, stupid, right? It's like, and so I wrote. They wanted me to write a piece about, basically to help explain to people that, hey, when you study architecture, you don't have to just build buildings. You can go do other kinds of things like what we've done. And I've thought about this a lot over the years. I think it really is the process. And when you come from a design background and understand iterative design and critique and all those kinds of things that make a good end product, it really doesn't matter what you apply that process to. It's a good process. So I think there's a lot to that.
And by going to conferences and putting yourself out there and meeting so many people and just kind of having this open door attitude and policy about approachability is, you don't know where that rabbit hole is going to lead. I mean, you're just open for business, right? And that business, you might not know what that is.
Yeah. And those conversations, I also teach an entrepreneurship class, and I've been doing that the last few years. And one of the things I talk to with the students when I talk about just starting something and doing something new and being out there, whether that's inside of an existing company or starting something new, is it's a very, I described it, it's a very naked thing that you're doing, because whenever you've got an idea or something new, the only way you're going to know if it's valid is to test it, right? Which is you got to show it to people, tell it to people, see how they respond to it. And, you have to have thick skin. A lot of times it's like either people aren't going to understand, you're not using the right language, but that's all just part of the process. And if you're good at it, I've claimed that I think the hardest job in the world, you want to guess what I'm going to say? Like for me, the most respect I give for probably the hardest thing I can imagine.
I'm dying to know. I was going to say raising kids.
I think, I don't have any kids, so I can't claim. Maybe that is. I think being a comedian is probably totally the single hardest thing that you can imagine.
Especially today.
Yeah. It's like you talk about being naked. It's like you're standing in front of a room trying to do what's really hard to do and to do it really well and to hold those people's attention for as long as some of these people do. It's like, wow, that's a really, really tough,
super vulnerable,
tough job.
Yeah.
Very vulnerable. I mean, you talk about having to be like, check it at the door.
Right.
That's one of those, right? You can't be, very, very tough. So I think a lot of the kinds of things that we do and anybody in any kind of a business that's putting new things and new thoughts out there, you have to learn how to roll with the punches, take the feedback and try to feed on it. But I think architects are good at that in general.
Yeah, I think you come out of school with that, hopefully. I mean, hopefully you get that by going through school. Some people don't. I mean, it's not a given, but
right.
I do think that skin gets thinner the longer you're out of it too. So it's like something you kind of have to remind yourself of and take a step back from that personal feeling that you get as a natural reaction, the very kind of lizard brain, fight or flight mentality, and say, wait a second, like that's not what this is about. This is about the goal, or this is about the project. It's not about me. It's hard to
separate the personal from you're the steward of that process, right?
It's hard to separate it, but it's also hard to interpret that when it comes across sounding so personally, right? With so much passion. I think that a lot of times when people hear that passion, that emotion behind the critique, because people see the potential, or they see, they see the potential of it, and it's not there yet. And it's like, but I've tried my hardest to get to this point. Don't you see? Like I need you right. to validate me right
validation,
now.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and that's definitely. I've got some interns in here this summer, and you can definitely see there's different personalities that just need that validation, and unfortunately, this is probably why I didn't have kids, or maybe because I didn't have kids. I'm not like I've just never had to do that. I'm kind of driven by longer term goals, so that's the other thing I think that's kind of interesting about this kind of work is you never see the impediments in front of you. It's kind of like, look, there's this long-term goal and it's going to be meandering, and I don't really care about everything in between here and the goal. And the reality is the goal, you never get to the goal. So it's this kind of a perpetual, always something else a little bit further down the road. And those are just, I think, probably personality types. I just happen to be one of those kind of people. And, but it kind of makes it evergreen. I feel like I'm 24 perpetually, even though I'll be 54 next month.
I think that the concept there, I haven't read this book, but I've seen the title and I've read the author's, some of his other work, and it's called The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. And
I know who he is, but I haven't read that book.
The Infinite Game is exactly what you're describing, right? There's no end in sight. We're in this for the long haul. We have the long-term vision. Yeah, we're going to make adjustments along the way to pivot, to do whatever you want, however you want to describe that. It's going to happen. But it's like, maybe that kind of fits with this model, this path that you're on, which is, you started ArcVision, and where did that path take its turns to get to where you are now? And obviously now is not the destination. Now is somewhere on the timeline, but it's going to go beyond now.
Yeah, for sure. And I've described the stuff that we're embroiled in now with AVAIL as, it really is building on all of the years and everything that we learned. There's bits and pieces of this that I can track back to, thoughts and things that we learned and formed over the last couple of decades. But I also think that's like, I've told people, it's like, I think I could work on this the rest of my career, right? It's a big, fat, juicy problem. And those are the things that I get excited about. It's like, hey, you start wading in thinking you're working on one thing, and then you discover, wow, this is actually a bigger,
I had no
harder
idea.
problem, right? And, at that point, it's like, then you just have to decide how long do you want to work on it. I like those kind of problems. I like when there's big problems to be solved.
So when did you decide to kind of switch course? I mean, I assume that even at ArcVision, you probably switched course.
Oh yeah. Well, that company, as I said, started at night. Yeah, it's still around. Started at 91. It was a services company. So basically, I always track back and say it's because I was born when I was born. So born when I was born, and being the age when the personal computer kind of came around, I got interested in computers, right? Kind of junior high school age, late, 79, 80, 81 timeframe. And then in high school was interested in it, go to college thinking I was going to do something around software, computers. And, lo and behold, there wasn't even such thing as computer science, right? So they put you in electrical engineering. My personal story was I made it about 3 semesters and like, what is this? This has nothing to do with what I thought it was going to be.
Not what I signed up for.
And then switched to architecture, which, in hindsight now was a great move, but got interested in the combined then my interest and got interested in the CAD side of it and 3D modeling and visualization and all of that. So when I started ArcVision, it was basically a services company where it was like hire Randall to do the stuff that you don't know how to do. Right. Yep. So, grew that, learned a lot just running a business and hiring people and figuring all that out in the early 90s. And then what became the RPC product, which is what ArcVision's, most people know it for, was just one of those things that I kind of figured out in the mid 90s. And, by 98, we had turned it into a software product. And at that point, that kind of took off. And over about an 18-month period, got out of the services business. And, the story there running a business is whenever you're running a services business, cash flow is like your enemy. And especially when you got employees, all of a sudden it's like you have software and you can sell this thing on the internet, back in 1998 and take your credit card and that money's in your account in 24 hours. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, the best thing ever.
Service versus product kind of epiphany right there.
So made that transition right pretty quick and recognized it. So, really now over the last 22 years, 23 years, been in the software, business. So at ArcVision, the story of AVAIL then is that, with all the success of ArcVision and that product line, part of what we ended up always working on and developing were basically content management systems to manage content and to do those types of things. So at some point you kind of wake up and you're like, wow, we're spending like all this engineering energy on content management. And, I'm asking myself, like, how many other people are doing the same thing? So you start looking around at all the other software systems and saying, well, everybody's kind of half-assed doing it. And then there's obviously the problem inside the firms of how they manage information and content. So, I can trace back kind of the origins of Avail, at least mentally, back to 2006, 7, 8 timeframe. And then we were building some new content management stuff there's a part of the ArcVision platform called ArcVision Dashboard is what we called it. I was just on a call with one of our large customers yesterday and telling them, it was a group of them out in the LA area. And I was telling them, I was like, I can track the roots of this back to people inside your firm, because I was at AU one year and had our ArcVision Dashboard, and we were thinking about, what ultimately became Avail at that time. And I was like, I stopped them in the hall and was like, hey, I got to show you something and I want to pick your brain about it. And they were like, great timing. We got a group inside the firm that's working on this. Let me get them introduced. So I can, it's like those are the way those, back to where we started, the conferences and being around people and getting to, grab 20 minutes of their time and talk about some of these things, leads to all these other things that go on. So we actually were developing Avail as a product at ArcVision in 2015, 2016 timeframe. We went into beta in 2016 with it. And then we were getting really strong affirmative reactions to what we were doing. And so I ended up spinning it out into a separate company just so that we could have its own mission. Needed to raise a little bit of money around it. It just clears up concerns and does all those things.
Gives you some focus. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what happened is we spun it out into a separate company. So I've been, leading at the helm since that with Avail. I'm still very involved, maybe much to everybody's chagrin here internally in the product side of it. But we've got a great team that we built here. Part of that story that I said I wrote for the alumni magazine was I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I've got 5 people here, including myself, that have architecture degrees that are engineers that are on the engineering team. So we've got a very design-minded engineering team. So it's been fun. Got a good group.
So why have you chosen to stick with creating products for architects? What's kept you adjacent?
That's a loaded question, right? Because I question that all the time. It's like, damn, how, would other industries, be more receptive or faster receptive to some of these kinds of things? I think that just goes back to it's my interest. It's like I love being around. I mean, they're obviously some of the brightest people that I know, right? Or people that are architects, engineers, designers. I think it's a noble, they tend to always be working on things that I think are largely for the public good and, very civic minded, I think is part of it, being around that group of people. Yeah, just affinity and interest, right, in the market. It's a huge market, right? So if you can figure out how to crack it, right, the numbers I've heard of global construction is like, $15 trillion a year. So it's like a huge number. So now if the complicated part of it is as a market is it's very fragmented. It's infinitely complex, which is also why it's a fun problem to try to solve. So from running a business, it's like, yeah, you get frustrated sometimes, but it's also doesn't mean you stop, right? So.
I think architects too are probably the most optimistic bunch out of a lot of those, right? Because we can imagine a better world and we're doing everything we can to do something about it, even though there's a lot of cynicism, right? Because we've been there, done that. We've seen everything. Like there's nothing that surprises us as far as what could go wrong on a project.
And I don't know. I'll equate this to, and we can tie this maybe into the more specific content kinds of issues and what we're doing and what we think we're solving. So even when I was running the services business, ArcVision in the early days, the hardest thing that you could do, right? One, you had to bid the project. And I call it the artist dilemma.
Yeah.
You're never done, right? And
Yeah.
this is I think this might be the architect's dilemma.
Design. Yeah, it's design. Right.
Whenever you're designing, you can never be done if you don't want to be done. So it's hard to put that in a bid and to think about it from a cost crunch standpoint, even though that's reality.
That's why the deadline exists, right?
Yep. So there's always deadlines. Yes, here's what we got to do. Puts lots of pressure on people, and I think that's why people get burned out and just disgruntled by it. You're not necessarily getting quote unquote paid for all the time that you put into it, right, and all that kind of energy. So I'm not sure what I'm sure there's plenty of people that have great answers to how do you solve that, and plenty of people have obviously built businesses around solving it. But my guess is, having never run an architecture firm or a design firm like that, they probably suffer from some of that same dilemma, which is we're never done. We kind of have this, it's like we'll work until we can't,
Yeah.
and or there's no money there. But at the same time, right, there's a project that has to be delivered. There's certain deliverables that have to go out the door. So it's a conundrum, right, of how to balance that. And anytime there's design in it and artistic kind of flair, I think you probably run into that problem.
There's rarely a time when a project finishes early, because if there's time still left, it'll get used, right?
Sure. Yeah, you're going to consume it with something, right?
And you don't get rewarded for being a good planner or good with your time for the most part, generalizing here. But if there's somebody on the team or leading a process that feels like more can be done because we haven't reached the end of the deadline yet, then they're going to push for everything they can to make that happen.
Yep. Yeah. So the way that to kind of tie this into the content management, one of the, so people, I'm always, the story's always evolving about what is AVAIL or what are you doing. But, one of the stories that we can tell is that when we started doing this, we were really trying to solve, you can think about it as content management, library management. It's kind of grown. The mission always grows, and we've kind of taken on more, but everybody stores their information in a file system. So typically it's Windows file folders somewhere, and that's where all that information data. And one of the ways that, I've been able to think about this and describe what the industry's problem is and where there's tons of inefficiencies is if you think about architecture and engineering firms are services businesses, and the people that work at those services businesses all day long sit at their desk, typically behind pieces of software that they use to encode. They create information. They're knowledge workers, so they're taking what's in their brain and they're putting it into something, whether that's a spreadsheet or a Word document or a PowerPoint file or a Revit model.
Yep.
They are encoding that information through this software into files. And then those files are the work product. Really that's the output is of those service firms. And that work output then is the way you transfer that knowledge. And that today for the last 40 years has been do that and put those files over on this file system somewhere. So, when you think of it through that lens, what we're doing is, it's no wonder why there's so much information being produced, right? That's what we, to some extent, get measured on.
Yep.
And produce more. We're exponentially producing more of that kind of information. And the bigger the firm gets, the tougher it is for people to know where all that information is. So really what we've been trying to do with AVAIL is that's the problem set that we've been trying to solve, which is, can we do a better job of helping people find that information? We actually let the information stay in the file system, but we put a new front end on the retrieval. So I like to say file systems are great for storage. They're absolutely terrible for retrieval when you're talking about like Windows File Explorer.
They're great if you want to search. They're not great if you want to find, right?
Yeah, correct. So we basically have peeled that problem apart and said, you have to store your files somewhere, let them get stored. And we've concentrated on solving the retrieval problem. How do you separate the files from the file system as far as how you want to search and organize and think about that information? and ultimately the files still get stored on the file system, but we kind of build that bridge.
It's similar to a problem we're dealing with in our company, and it's that. So like your file system analogy, it's a mess, right? It's probably not just one file system. It's probably 5. It's probably
multiple. Yep.
It's probably in Teams, and it's probably in OneNote, and it's probably in email, and it's it's in and it's in a folder, and it's probably somewhere else on somebody's
contend that's only going to get worse too. That's going to continue to explode. You're not going to get fewer places. You're only going to keep adding places.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just like websites, right? So this is the what Google tried to solve and just said, stop searching on the website for the thing. Just come to us, and we'll surface that information and provide a very simple user experience to do that. And so I think that also trained people. I mean, and mobile phones were no help either, right? Like you don't have to be organized anymore. There's on iPhones since they came out, there's pretty much been no file system. And so it's just like every file is stored in an app, and maybe you've backed it up somewhere else, but probably haven't. And you just go through the global search box to find the thing that you're looking for. And hopefully the metadata points you in the right direction. And the algorithm gets smarter at helping you find what you're looking for because it learns you over time. And that's basically what you're talking about, right? Is providing that front end, magnifying glass to look through to find the thing that you don't care where it's stored.
Yep, that's it. And my contention has been until somebody tells me I'm wrong that we're solving a very different search problem than say Google had to solve. So I think to some extent I can tell a story that says the problem that Google solved was relatively easy compared to the problem that we're working on, which, if you think about a lot of times inside of an organization, something exists. It's like literally finding a needle in a haystack. It's like, I know that thing exists. I have to figure out how to wade through all of this to get to that thing that I know exists. That's a very different search problem than what generally Google solves, which is, hey, I'm typing in something I'm interested in. All they had to do was bring back something that you feel like met your demand. Oh, didn't know that existed. I'm going to go there. I'm going to go to that website, or I'm going to
You're not explicitly looking for one thing.
Exactly.
Most of the time.
So I haven't quite I'm sure there's search experts that could say, oh, that's X, and you're talking about Y. It's like, so I don't know what all the proper terminology to describe that. I'm kind of that. I'll kind of bumble my way into like expertise without even knowing what to call these things. And somebody that's like, learned, learned, is that the right way? That is would probably tell me what how to better describe that. But
well, you're just like an architect, right? You can't know everything about everything. You know enough to get you in trouble, like you said earlier.
No, but it's a good juicy problem that we're trying. And we've started we put out the latest version of AVAIL release. We've been through kind of 4 major iterations, so we're in our 4.x version of the software platform. So last fall, a lot of that work was we began working a little more intently on the search part of it, and we call it progressive search. And kind of our contention is, yes, we want you to come and type something in about what you're looking for, but that's probably not going to get you to the needle in the haystack. What that is the first clue to finding the needle in the haystack. Then can we bring back enough information to ask you a couple more questions? That's the way I always describe it. It's like, look, we need to now say, hey, you told me this, but I need to ask you 2 more questions before I can help you to really narrow down to what you're looking for. So we've started calling that progressive search. And it's this kind of like, hey, you're probably not going to type in one thing and get to it. So anyway, it's an interesting dilemma.
Because you are going for a specific result, that does make a lot of sense.
A lot of times. What's interesting though, when you look at, we capture lots of search on the platform, and obviously get to, we can see what people are searching for across the platform inside their own respective firms. Of course, the top terms are like literally the number one search term is door or some form of door. I've also, I was just running the numbers on this. We captured, there was over 2,000 different permutations of searches with the word door in it.
Oh my gosh.
So when you begin to think about how complex this is, right? And we've been working on, and I know you doing work around the manufacturer side of this about where that information is, but that's part of where now we're trying to figure out, like, how can we, if you've typed in something very specific, how do you match that up and deliver the right information? But my joke about it's door, window, chair, table, and I'm like, search the top search terms. If you ask a third grader how to build a house or what makes up a house, that's basically the way people search for stuff. Door, window, chair.
And it's incredible how smart search has gotten, because and again, I think this goes, like, technology trains us, I'm searching on my phone for something and I got fat fingers and there's a period in between every word instead of
I'm the same way.
A space bar, a space,
Yep.
Or there's an @ symbol depending on which app I'm in. So if I'm on Twitter, every word has an @ symbol in between, and it still can find what I'm looking for, even with typos in the words in between the periods. And so obviously it's been trained over time to
probably culling those things out and knows that,
But it's also trained me now to where I go to an app, and if I misspell something by one letter and it can't find a result, I'm like pissed off.
Right. Yeah. Well, they should have better technology. Right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. That's, yes, definitely. When people do it well, it raises the bar. It really makes everybody have to,
catch up, get on board,
improve what they're doing. Right.
This episode of Troxel Podcast is made possible by Twinmotion. What if you could visualize your building in a couple of clicks, remove months from the design process, or create a bridge between stakeholders to solve problems before they even come up? Our friends at Twinmotion offer simple, real-time visualization for architects. Their technology lets you view and edit your scene on the go in the same pixel-perfect quality as the final rendering. Twinmotion seamlessly integrates with other tools like SketchUp and Revit, transforming your BIM or CAD models into high-quality images, panoramas, VR videos, or presentations. Sound complicated? Well, what if I told you that Twinmotion enables anyone to present the biggest ideas in the easiest way possible, regardless of previous CG experience? To download your exclusive free trial, head to twinmotion.link/TRXL. That's twinmotion.link, not .com, .link/TRXL. Monograph. Monograph is building a community of like-minded firm owners and operations leaders who are looking for solutions that align with their firm's values. On top of that, Monograph is building the only cloud-based practice operations software built exclusively for architects by architects. Monograph's easy-to-use and beautifully designed software allows you and your team to know in near real time whether you are on pace to deliver a project on budget. With Monograph, you and your team can plan project schedules, budgets, role assignments, and team members all in one place. The best part of Monograph? It doesn't require a degree in finance to use. To experience the difference today, sign up for a free trial at monograph.com. And to underscore their commitment to the community, on August 12th, Monograph will be hosting their first ever virtual conference. It's called Section Cut. This one-day event brings firm owners, operations leaders, and project leaders together to learn from success stories and workshops, all with a goal of improving their business. Reserve a seat at Section Cut today by visiting sectioncut.com. And ArcIT. You may be doing IT yourself or have someone you trust doing it, so why would you even consider switching IT providers to make technology your competitive advantage anyway? Well, many of you don't feel like you're getting enough value from your current IT provider. Some examples of this include slow response times for critical issues, the inability of your provider to answer key questions that you have pertaining to your business, the same issues showing up over and over without long-term solutions to the root of the problem, and it's just likely that they're doing an okay job and you'd rather avoid a difficult conversation with the people already in place. Well, the truth is, okay doesn't cut it, and the right IT provider can make a meaningful difference in your day-to-day work experience and in the bottom line of your business. It's also key to remember that you are in business to make money, and the right IT provider can help. A great IT provider takes on the load of managing the transfer process, so you don't have to worry about it and you can concentrate on running the business. They take on all the work with onboarding through the allocation of their resources and include you in the critical decisions along the way to minimize your time away from billable work. So, as business owners and architects, How often do we think about our IT provider? Typically, only when things go wrong. And for many of us, unfortunately, this happens too often, especially with the latest emphasis on remote work. I know that I've had to deal with my fair share of IT fire drills. Not pleasant. ArcIT, however, is a very different kind of company. They specialize in serving architecture, design, and engineering firms, and their goal is to help you use technology as a competitive advantage. This means that they understand your technology stack, and they won't waste your time and money learning how your tools work within your process. Combine that with industry-leading response times, proactive remote hardware management, and solid disaster recovery and backup solutions. That's something that everybody should be thinking of, honestly. And enterprise-grade security management. And yet, above all, these are just table stakes for a solid IT company. ArcIT goes a step further. They become your strategic partner when it comes to planning, budgeting, and integrating new technology into your business processes. So all of this sounds expensive, right? Nope, because ArcIT is highly specialized. For our industry, their pricing is on par, or in some cases even lower than other IT providers. ArcIT is transparent and even publishes the pricing right on their website. Speaking of their website, there's also something else you should check out when you're there, and that is their Design Under Influence blog and video series. Again, adding value to IT-type solutions across industry, all good stuff. So your business deserves a competent, responsive, and proactive IT partner. Reach out to my friends at ArcIT for a free consultation. So go to getarchit, that's getarchit.com, arc like architecture in the middle, and click Work With Us. So thanks very much to ArcIT for sponsoring this episode of the Troxel Podcast. And now let's get back to our conversation. Well, the whole kind of bigger topic here that I thought would be interesting to get into is the importance of content from your guys' perspective, because you see it all. And because, I come from a firm that had 5 to 6 generations in it, and you're seeing this because you're serving the whole industry, that you're seeing it replicated over and over and over again. And like you even said earlier, like you want to create this thing. Who else is creating this thing? And at some level, everybody's creating this thing. They're doing it for themselves. They're trying to find a way to organize this stuff and take their efficiency up a notch. And there's other people in the firm who just see no value in that whatsoever. It's like, no, you just draw the doors, right? Like you don't search for doors, you draw doors, period. And I saw this Twitter thread I was telling you earlier, but I'll say it again for the sake of the audience. I saw this short little Twitter thread that said that somebody's boss looked over their shoulder and said, "Why did you model this door?" And it's like, we didn't have a door. Yes, there was already a door here. That's not a door. Those are detail lines, to speak Revit parlance, right? So because one person who's older generations and has always done it that way says that's how we do it still, and they don't even really have a concept of the purpose of a door family and what that could mean later on down the road. Kind of thinking the long-term vision, purpose, potential of what BIM could be. That's a very shaky could, right? Because it would require lots of people to get a lot better at what they deliver versus this kind of incentivization for shortcuts, right? Which is our industry is based on, because we sell time for money. And so the less time, the better. And so some people see standards as, and I put content into this, as handcuffs, and other people see standards as freedom. And those two people sit next to each other at the same firm. So what have you seen around that theme? And obviously you guys are doubling down and on content and smart. I'm sure you want it to be smart content. You want it to be content with some level of standards to it. You want it to have some level of if I get this door and I get this window, I've got the same parameters or the right parameters. I've got the right level of detail. I've got the right kind of naming convention and keyword searching. And there's a lot of layers there. And then there's the guys who are just like, what? No, just draw the door and be done and move on.
Yeah. So a lot of things packed in there, and some of what we can talk about here are just things that I've heard right in some of these conversations with others. The first thing that I'll say is that about 7 years ago, 2014, a guy named Parley Burnett. I don't know if you know Parley. He has a company called Iconic BIM. They have a product called Guardian now. Anyway, I got to know Parley. Actually, he used to work at what a lot of times is considered our competitor, Unify, which is another company that has a Revit content management solution. But I got to know Parley when he was working there, and he and I were the initial chairs of a conference called the Building Content Summit, BCS for short. So a lot of that, kind of goes back to I was wanting to learn and inject myself. So I just kind of got involved with helping to get that started, just so I could be around some of these conversations and learn. So the one, we used to always joke around that Building Content Summit that I'd say my takeaway from doing that, every year up until, and in Europe, up until COVID, that, there is no magic content. Our joke was there is no magic unicorn content. It's like content means a lot of different things to a lot of different people at a lot of different times in the process. And I think one of the challenges in the industry has been that people tend to want to they either want to dumb content down to its lowest common denominator to serve the most, or they do the opposite, which is it's way overkill because one easy way to think about bifurcating uses of content is, what's needed for documentation versus what's needed for visualization, right? Which are two
different purpose.
Drastically different things. And a lot of times, you can look in Revit, and even the way families are formed in Revit, they allow you to, what's the graphic representation of this versus the 3D model. But there's just lots of challenges. So the first thing I'll admit is I don't know what the answer to this is. All I know now is it's complicated enough that it's not as easy as people maybe, want to make it out to be or think it could be. Because as soon as you put on one hat and think you know everything, it's like somebody's going to tell you, no, there's
a closet full of hats. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not what we want or need. That leads me to, another conversation that I had. Actually, I don't know, I won't say his name, but another guy that I got to know through working on that told me the story. The first time I met him, he's like, he's an architect working in an architecture firm, and said that he went out. They did like maybe assisted living homes, kind of residential facilities and stuff. He said he was out on the job site, and he's like walking around looking, they're framing, and he's like looking at the way that this had been framed. He's like, that's not how we designed this. So he's talking to the construction foreman or the person running the crew, and he's like, oh yeah, y'all been drawing that wrong for a long time. This is the way you actually build this stuff. And it's this realization. It's like, just because that's what we put on the paper doesn't mean that that's how it's actually, somebody in the field knows better.
Yeah.
And maybe does it. They just didn't tell you, right? They just ignore what you put on the piece of paper and they do it the way they know should be done.
Yeah.
And then related to that, I was talking with somebody at a very large firm, very, very large firm. And he told me this story about he was like, if I ever catch somebody, putting BIM, LOD level 500 information in this, he was like, we don't get paid. Here's what, not only do they not get paid to do it, his explanation was, look, we're only supposed to develop this information up to a certain point. At the point when you start putting more information in there than is supposed to be there, you cause confusion downstream because the person that's now inheriting that information maybe thinks that somebody did more than they, were supposed to or
is
qualified.
Telling me how to do it, right?
Yes. So it's like when you start, and that was, having somebody, again, back to, admittedly, I'm not the practitioner, but hearing people explain that, it's like, yes, the person in the field doing that work knows more about this than you do. Understand that and admit it. And therefore, maybe 2 lines for the door is enough. It's the people that install those doors know exactly how this thing should go in there. And one, you shouldn't spend any more time than you need to. Let them do their job. And then,
the whole idea of plans and elevations and sections are a representation of an abstracted level of representation. And if you do get too, like you need enough detail to work things out. But if you go overboard, then you're telling someone how it should be done. And that's not that's architects have decided that that's not their thing, right? You're not allowed to do means and methods, right?
So that's, I mean, architects traditionally have used words like cartoon sets. And, like even in our design process here internally with the software, it's like I was just in a meeting earlier today, and it's like on a design meeting, and it's like, I'm not going to prescribe the answer. I'm going to try to articulate what I think the problem that we need to be thinking about. There may be 10 different ways that we could come about solving that. I don't want to be, I could give you a couple of ideas, but I don't want that to be like the stone. I just want to make sure that we all understand that here's what the problem is that we're trying to solve and how to go about it. So I think when you get into pieces of software and BIM and things like Revit, the tendency is now to try to get maybe sometimes more detailed than you need to, or, maybe somebody else needs to solve that downstream. So this is why it gets complicated about, what kind of information should the manufacturers be giving you? Well, it depends on what part of the process I'm in as to what I need.
Well, and every manufacturer is going to give me a different set of answers for that too, which is hard to square.
Well, even, when we first did the first year of the Building Content Summit, we had 100 plus people in the room, and Aaron Maller, I don't know if you know Aaron.
He was just on the show. Yep.
Yeah. Aaron was involved in that. And Parley, of course, that I mentioned earlier. And one of the things that we ended up doing, which I thought was interesting, and was, we said, look, let's break the building. Let's make a graph that's the traditional building process. And then let's have the other axis, besides time in this process, be fidelity. We ended up using the word fidelity of information, of model, or of information, metadata, or whatever that you're using. So what we did was we put those pieces of paper in front of all 100 people and said, we want you to plot out on this scale what you need at what time. And even that was interesting. Some people said at the very earliest, right, if you got a visualization hat on, in the very earliest stages of schematic design, and you're trying to show somebody something, you might want a high fidelity model to look realistic. And then after you've kind of done some of that early work, you throw that away and you go back to like basics. And
now that we have some more understanding, we might start over. Yeah.
Yeah. But even in that room, right, of 100 people, I'd have to go dig and see if I could find that info. But it was like, not everybody agrees with what you need at different time. And it's really, I think, a testament to the complexities of the different roles that people have, what they need or want at different times. And, that makes content, and what makes good content a hard thing to answer. Right?
Yeah. In black and white. Yeah. It's interesting because there's so many levels to this that we could talk about. There's, like you said, there's the purpose of the model, and there can be team members who have different ideas about what that could be. There's a principal in charge who's like, it's drawings, right? To get agency approval, period. There's somebody else who's like, no, we're going to use this for commissioning for, whatever sustainability status we're trying to achieve with the building. Then there's the visualization, and then there's the energy modeling, and there's all these different reasons, right? There's
demands,
clash detection during the process, and et cetera, et cetera. And so you've got one set of deliverables for an agency approval, which is 2D lines in a PDF or on paper, to which there is basically no metadata embedded within anymore. That is likely, for many decades past, is what they actually build from. And then there's this whole other direction that we're going toward, call it digital twin, call it, owner agency over their model in the future to run their facilities or whatever. And in the middle somewhere there is, like you mentioned earlier, like, no, we don't build it that way at all. We don't even ask the next piece in the process what they need in this model or in this set of drawings. We just have this set of assumptions that we encode into every one that goes out our door, because that's our QA QC process.
Right.
Man, that's a messy, messy puzzle.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's really complicated. You can look at that as that's the fun part, is to try to start to crack that apart.
It's a wicked problem, right? And there's some people who are...
Yeah, it's a really wicked problem.
There's some people who are up for it.
It could be a frustrating problem, right? It's a frustrating problem too, just because of that. The other thing that I've kind of tossed around, which I kind of, around that building content summit, I had proposed a couple of times that I thought an interesting talk or session would be, I wanted to have two people debate, and this is, you have to kind of put your business hat on to think about this, but you ask people, is your content an asset or is it a liability? Basically, where is it on your balance sheet? Because it's
like home ownership.
It's definitely yes. Well, I have that debate with people too all the time.
Right.
But it's a good way to kind of really back up and say, root cause, what are we trying to do? When you talk to most people about their content, and from that standpoint, like reusable assets, things that they build and maintain, your door model and all those types of things, they act and treat them like assets. Very protective.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, that's ours. We're not sharing that with anybody. That's intellectual property. It's an asset that's on our balance sheet. But in practice, the way you see almost every firm operate is this stuff becomes liabilities. And at that point, it's like, is this really what you're building? Is this really where you're building value in your business is from that? Or are those things really liabilities? If they're liabilities, then there should be this call for like sharing, right?
A shared liability.
I hate to think about how many times people have modeled the same stuff.
My gosh. Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God. Like how many millions of man hours could be, used more productively than redrawing the same thing. So within firms, we see this a lot. It's a lot of the reason justification inside firms for using things like Avail. We want our employees to reuse assets as often as possible. I don't want them, when they can't find it easily, to go spend time redoing it, because then you've got QA/QC, potential new QA/QC problems with it, regardless of spending the time to draw it again, right? You introduce all kinds of potential error and those types of things. So, people want to reuse this. Well, if you're reusing a lot of stuff, really, then I think you got to take another step and say, is that door where we hang our hat on our value? It's like, no, just buy a good standard set of doors, right? Why isn't everybody using the same set of standard doors? It's like,
well, and to further complicate this, people are downloading crap from the internet, right? Like, how many times have you heard the story about a Revit City model borking your Revit model for 7 days with 5 people working on it?
Yep.
And to complicate things even more, it's like, well, okay, I'll just go back to my last project and copy that broken family out of it. And guess what? It's broken in this project now, and it's broken in the next project, and it's broken in the next one. And there's a huge liability internally, as finding content from an old project that you thought was just fine versus downloading something from the internet that has a screwed up parameter in it that takes down your whole file for a few days or a few hours.
Yep. So I'll tie this into some of the things, another quick story, and then kind of, some of the things that we're...
Just to be clear, we should draw doors out of detail lines. That's what I'm getting out of this.
Right? It's like...
Copy, paste.
I've got another client that's actually kind of a construction company and integrated, design internally. And one of the stories that they told me early on was that they had like every company, you end up with problems in the field, you build things and find these problems. So they began a process to try to capture that knowledge, right? When we find a problem in the field, like a leak in the roof, what's causing this? What's the root cause? Well, ends up that there's, a roof design, a roof system that they're using and somebody's using either wrongly, or maybe it's even in the drawings wrong, but something's penetrating the membrane and causing these leaks. So they spend time, go out and learn that. So then they begin to try to capture that information, and they had started an internal database of lessons learned, right? Like, hey, here's a problem, that we've encountered. Don't do it again. Well, then the frustrating thing inside of those firms is like, it doesn't go away. And, when you peel back that problem, I'm like, look, you put this knowledge in that knowledge base, but it's disconnected from what people are actually doing every day. There's no rational person who's going to say, hey, I'm going to go read through all of the potential problems and just to see. So what that got me thinking about, and some of the stuff that we're doing at Avail now, is we're trying to, what really needs to happen is when somebody is using a detail, right, that matches to that problem and it's brought onto a sheet, right then is when you want to pull that information to that person and say, hey, right. And right now, all of our content, right, when you think about that lessons learned databases content, the Revit detail is a piece of content in the library. All of this content lives in different databases. They're in different file systems. They're in different places. So one of the things that we're working on now is how to begin to connect those databases. Yes, that information needs to live over there, that's what that system's for, but these things need to be connected. And from a technical standpoint, there's no reason we couldn't begin to connect them. So that's some of the problem that we're working on now is like, hey, content, we've kind of tackled at least the first stage of like, hey, we're pretty good about the individual pieces of content. Can we now figure out how to start connecting these things together? Because really that detail is a concept. Yes, it manifests itself in a Revit model, maybe a PDF document, but there might also be photos that were taken off on site somewhere that live somewhere. There might be this lessons learned database that needs to be a connection to that. So how do you begin to pull all this stuff back together on behalf of the end user that says, oh, I didn't stand a chance in hell of ever finding that because yes, it was in that system, but there's just no way I ever would have. No. They're just disconnected. So I think that's a big problem in the industry is it's not that we lack information. It's this information is all disconnected. So
it's unstructured. Yeah.
Unstructured data. It's all disconnected. Yes, we put this stuff in file systems and in databases, but those aren't connected in any meaningful way that a human, right, stands a chance of catching that. Or, it's just very, very inefficient right now where all that is. So you can probably tell from my voice, this is some of the stuff that we're working on now. This is kind of exciting is how can we start to connect that information so that you can now make people more productive. They can catch those problems earlier. This information can have a life that stays connected, beyond these individual pieces of content. Most of the time, individual pieces of content, they go in archive storage and nobody ever looks at them again. But I think if you can start to connect it up, it'll have more value over longer periods of time, I guess would be the way I'd describe that.
I think this has come up a few times in the past few years about, people see potential for connecting these things together. And it's funny because the snarky solution, the snarky response has been, oh, this was solved a long time ago. It was just ahead of its time. And that was Microsoft's Clippy. Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. You're trying to, are you going to write a letter? Let me help you with that. Right. And it's like, it recognizes some kind of pattern and then it sets off an impulse to go look for something and it brings it back. Hey, this might be relevant to you right now. And that's kind of what we're talking about.
No, I think, and it'll just hopefully be a better implementation of, what was his name?
Clippy. Clippy, the dancing clip.
Yeah.
The little paper clip.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, and this is part of that, what I described earlier is kind of what we've been calling progressive search, but it's really augmented design.
Totally.
Like how do if we can be predictive about what you're doing or recognize those patterns, can we bring you the next piece of information that you need or something that's related? Because if you think about it, we probably spend half of our days as information workers on the journey trying to go find or get that information from these systems that they live in. And I've described, I haven't actually said this in a while, but I talked about a lot about I refer to it as inverting the web. It's like, yes, Web 1.0 was that all this stuff's out there and now you can go to it. The opportunity now is to, now that we've got this stuff digitized and can start to structure the information, there's no reason why we can't start bringing that information back to you based on it being in a position to see the signals and watch what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think if you can start to do, it can sound creepy. People, can either creep out on those kinds of thinking, but there's no doubt that this is where this stuff's going to start leading. And that is And you know the way services are. I mean, look at Amazon. As soon as they start doing stuff for you and they move the bar, it's like you can't live without it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you thought 3-day delivery was good. Wait till I can, put it on a drone and get it to you in an hour, right? Yeah. You'll get addicted to that very quickly, and that'll be the expectation for everything. And I think a lot of what we're discussing here fits into that same. It's like as soon as we do start to be able to give you a little sense of that, it'll be like, give me more. I don't have to go on those wild goose chases. We've had a couple of partnerships, one of which we put an announcement out a couple of years ago, and this is all slow coming. So, but with Underwriters Laboratory, and that's a great example where they've got sustainability data, all their fire safety data. It's like, why do I have to go if I'm sitting in Revit working on a 2-hour fire rated door and we're sitting in a position where we know that? Why couldn't we automatically query that database and bring that information to you pre-qualified? Mm-hmm. It's like, why do I have to go off on the wild goose chase through another content management system to go try to find this stuff? So that's kind of at the root of a lot of the stuff that we're trying to work on and the way we're thinking about what we're doing. The content just becomes the first part of the signal. And then can you begin to layer in and attach information to that and know something, right? Get smarter over time.
And I think a lot of the things you're talking about, when you do go off on that wild goose chase, it's full of distraction. And it, like I've said before, like somehow you don't even know how you just ended up shopping for shoes. Like you were going to the UL website and now you're buying a pair of shoes. And it's like, that's a very real thing. And so not only are people spending the time looking for that, but they're also getting time stolen from them because advertising is really good at what it does. And that distraction is very real. And there's things flashing on the screen and there's extra buttons popping up and they're the first 5 search results are actually ads anyway. And all these things where what you're really talking about is putting the layer of exposure right into the tool that they're working in so that they can actually be more productive and you can get rid of that whole layer of distraction.
Yeah. And I think, the lofty goal is, can we take the more mundane things out of the equation, right? The things that, in hindsight, people would be like, yeah, that was my job to do all that. It's like, well, sheesh, wouldn't you rather have been designing? Right. It's like, can you start to drag along all the more mundane things and make those things go away? And it frees up more time. Maybe the freeing up more time is to start playing guitar or something. That's what I started doing.
Get away from the office.
Got my guitar, right? It's like, do something else with your time, or design more, or get more building out the door faster. Who knows, right?
Well, Randall, where can people find out more about what you guys are up to and follow you guys online in your journey?
Yeah, thanks, Evan. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Avail or know where the website, it's getavail.com. If I wanted to get avail.com, you could actually go buy it or buy it for me. That would be the nice gift. It's
put a few bucks in the tip
highly
jar.
Sought after. Yeah. So we ended up using getavail.com. So you can go learn about the product on that front. And we have a blog. I try to write something every couple of months, kind of around these kinds of topics at the higher level. And we're always doing webinars, and if you're involved with what we do, I'm out doing this kind of stuff all the time with our customers, and I don't keep many secrets. I'm pretty much always just, blurting out what we're thinking and what we're working on. So
fantastic. Well, thanks for taking the time and for being so open and sharing today. It was super fun, and I appreciate the conversation. Let's do it again sometime.
Nope. Thanks for inviting me. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to the Troxel Podcast, and once again, I would like to thank ARC IT for sponsoring this episode. Visit their website at getarchit, that's getarchit.com. Thank you to Twinmotion for their support of this episode of Troxel Podcast. You can visit twinmotion.link/TRXL, or I've made it easy for you. Just click the link in the show notes and download your copy of Twinmotion for free. I'd like to thank Monograph for their support of this episode of the Troxel Podcast. To reserve a seat at their first ever interactive virtual conference, visit sectioncut.com today. This show is part of the Gable Media Podcast Network. You can see all the shows at gablemedia.com. That's GABLMEDIA.com. You can help support what I'm doing here by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts to help get the word out and of course, share it with your friends. I'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment on the website at trxl.co/podcast, where you can find every episode. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. Just search for eTroxel. Talk to you soon.